King Viserys is the epitome of nobility and good taste compared to the Viserys we get in Game of Thrones, Daenerys' brother, who is power-mad, egotistical, and just plain delusional. That said, Viserys is not a great king. He's a decent person. He seems to be rather thoughtful. He can be strong but tender-hearted when needed. He genuinely cares about the people around him, and he has a deep love for both his wife, Emma, and his daughter, Rhaenyra. But Game of Thrones has consistently been a needed corrective to the idea that being a good-hearted and caring and kind person necessarily makes you the best king for your people. In fact, it's no guarantee that you'll even be a decent leader at all. Think about Ned Stark in Game of Thrones, who becomes the hand to the king and is so committed to his ideals of what is good and just and moral that it leaves him quite rigid. And it leaves him incapable of dealing thoughtfully and flexibly with the circumstances that present themselves to him. He stays committed to his values, he stays committed to making sure all is done according to the highest ideals of loftiness and goodness, and the result of all that commitment to the just and the good is that it gets him his head chopped off. Worse than that, at least from his perspective, is that it leads to the ruin of his family and constant war in the Seven Kingdoms. The peace that was forged by the defeat of the Targaryens and Robert's rebellion dissolves into factionalism and bloodshed. This is the opposite of what Ned would have wanted, but it is what comes to pass because of his rigid, static, unflexible commitment to his idealism. Now, Viserys is not as heroic or conventionally noble-hearted as Ned. He is not going to lose sleep over the kingdom not upholding the highest and most lofty ideals and commitment to the good of all. But he is a similar kind of figure. He is a rather limited and myopic king who does not have the awareness and the mental acuity to understand the scheming and ideals of others and the effects his actions have on the lives of other people. He can only act on what he in the moment, under the whim of whatever impulse moving through him, says is correct and good. This leads him to making a series of decisions that might provide temporary catharsis, but in the long term lead to his ruin and that of his kingdom. He is genuinely committed to the preservation of peace, but in this rather shallow and limited commitment to his ideals and to what he believes to be right, he lays the groundwork for the devastation of the Targaryen dynasty. The Targaryens, of course, continue ruling for several centuries after the events in House of the Dragon, but they are never as strong as they were under the reign of Viserys' father, King Jaehaerys. King Jaehaerys ruled for 50 years, the longest, I believe, of any Targaryen king. He is the most beloved and respected king in the Targaryen line outside of Aegon himself. Under Jaehaerys' rule, the kingdoms were prosperous. The realm flourished. It was a hotbed for commerce and art and culture. That doesn't mean everything was perfect, and it doesn't mean everyone was happy. But the kingdom was as stable and as secure as it ever is. But Jaehaerys was flawed. He did not see the factionalism that was forming even during his reign. The other families pursued their own interests with cunning and guile. They knew that the king and the kingdom had become complacent to a degree, and so they were able to pursue their own interests. That, while not directly undermining the realm at first, laid the foundation for it to be undermined later. And that was with Jaehaerys, a noble-hearted, far-seeing, and overall thoughtful and wise ruler, the epitome of what a Targaryen ruler can and should be. Even if Jaehaerys had been able to rule forever, he would have had a difficult time stopping these little sparks from turning into a blaze. And Viserys is no Jaehaerys. He is a rather narrow-minded and insular person. He sticks to what he knows, and that's being more on the bookish side, more on the slightly socially awkward side, beneath all his regal airs. He doesn't quite know how to read people. He's prone to lashing out. He's prone to acting impulsively. And he does not have the ability to understand the different schemes and plans and interests going on around him. And he does not have that heightened receptiveness to people's actions and to what is going to happen and to the effects every decision he makes is going to have on others that Jaehaerys does. Viserys did not even really want to be the king. He became the king because he was chosen to be the king at a council meeting. Near the end of Jaehaerys' rule, the king became rather languid. He became rather sickly and old and sclerotic. He needed to choose an heir, and the problem was that all his immediate heirs were dead. It was an open question who was going to become the ruler of Westeros after he died. There was a big debate between Rhaenys, not to be confused with Rhaenyra, the wife of Corlys Velaryon, the richest man in the world, and the leader of one of the premier mercantile houses of Westeros, and little Viserys, the awkward, unassuming, not particularly well-respected prince. They chose Viserys. Corlys and Rhaenys are obviously not very happy about this choice, and that resentment lingers long after Jaehaerys' death. There's also the matter of the Hightowers, who have their own plans and ambitions. Otto Hightower is the hand of the king, and the one most responsible for handling the day-to-day affairs of the kingdom, when the flighty, dreamy Viserys cannot really be bothered. Otto has his own plans, and they can be quite icky, quite sordid, and a bit tasteless, such as when we see him pressure his daughter, Alicent, to seduce the king after the death of the king's wife. This is a plan that, from a moral perspective, we hope will not work, because it's not good for anyone, especially not Alicent, whom the show very much takes pains to portray as a victim in this circumstance. But of course, why does the king need another wife in the first place? It's because he's so desperate to have an heir for so long. He's so desperate for a male heir to carry on the throne because he's reluctant to give the throne to his daughter Rhaenyra. Perhaps understandably after the whole Rhaenys debacle. But his constant desire to have a son leads to him continuing to impregnate his wife, Aemma, leading to her death, which he could have foreseen because she has had such a hard time giving birth to children in the past. And yet, again, thinking limitedly, Viserys can only think about what he wants in the moment, what he thinks would be best right then and there, leading to the death of his wife in a very gruesome scene wherein he has the choice to either try to save his son or let them both die. But if he let them both die, they would die peacefully. As is, Emma is butchered in a very graphic and disturbing scene, and Viserys' son dies anyway. This leads to Viserys deciding to make Rhaenyra his heir and making everyone pledge loyalty to him. But, as you know if you've even the slightest understanding of the books, he also is going to be married again to Alicent, who is Rhaenyra's best friend from childhood in this version, which is ultra disturbing. And thus, Viserys' actions create these two separate camps. Viserys hardly could have done more to create instability and uncertainty in the realm if he had tried. His actions fundamentally lead to the tearing asunder of the Targaryen dynasty. And yet, Viserys was not trying to destroy the dynasty. He deeply cares about his family, and he wants to do what's best for them. He simply has a rather narrow and rather shallow understanding of what is best for the family in the long run, based only on his actions in the here and now. He's rather flighty and weak-willed. He gives his trust to Rhaenyra, but only after he's exhausted all other options at that moment, and then he goes ahead and gets married and has more kids anyway. He doesn't know what he wants for himself. He can be easily swayed. The kingdom is not better for that. The kingdoms need a good ruler, not just a good person ruling. So anyway, thank you all for watching. If you liked what you saw today, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Donate to my Patreon if you can and you want to see more videos like this. I'm so thrilled to be watching Game of Thrones again. If you're interested in seeing more videos about House of the Dragon, please sound off in the comments and say so. Anyway, tune in soon for the next analysis. It will be coming relatively quickly, I promise you that. Thank you all again. Adios, comrades.